In Lesson 6 we'll be working with decimal numbers, and the first part is on reading and writing decimal numbers. Now in Lesson 1 we discussed place value and reading and writing whole numbers. It'll be a similar idea here, except we'll be working with decimal numbers. And I've written on the board there some of the place values that you're familiar with, like the ones, the tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, and 100,000s places. Recognize the pattern here. Start with the 100,000s on the left. You divide by 10 to get the 10,000s, the next place. Divide by 10 to get the thousands, which is the next place. Divide by 10 to get 100. Divide by 10 to get 10. Divide by 10 to get 1. Go to the next side of the right of the decimal point, and you divide by 10 again, and you get 1 over 10, the tenths place. Then you would divide by 10 again and get 1 over 100, the hundredths place. Then you would divide by 10 again, 1 over 1,000, the thousandths place. And then just to speed things up, you also have the 10,000s, the 100,000s, the millions, and you would keep going. I just have up to the millionths place. So some other things to think about here. To the left of the decimal point, you have the ones, tens, hundreds, and so on. To the right, you have the tenths, hundredths. They all end in THS. That tells you that it's a fraction. And just a good way to remember your pattern is start with a place value on the left of the decimal point that you're familiar with, and just keep dividing by 10 as you go. And you'll see how you just progressively get 1 over 10, 1 over 100, and so on. Let's think about something else here. If we had 6.1, if we had that number, another way to write it would be 6 and 1/10. Or if we had like a 5.4, we could write that 5 and 4/10. Or if we had 6.85, we could write that 6 and 85 hundredths. Notice it's a lot easier just to write 6.85 than 685 fraction bar 100. That's just takes a lot longer to do. So decimal form of a number, that's just a simplified way of writing a fraction. Well, now let's do some practice problems. Look at practice problem A. I want you to write that sentence, that number sentence, using digits instead. We touched on this briefly in lesson 1, and I told you that the word "and," when you see that, that means your decimal point. So when we're working just with whole numbers, we never use the word "and" when we write it out using words. So here we see that word "and" we know that that means 10.33. So that's the way we would write that. 10 and 33 hundredths is just 10.33. Look at B. 5 and 12 10,000ths. That tells us that the 12 thousandths part, that's on the right side of the decimal point. Now the practice problem A we did was 33 hundredths, and the hundredths, that's the second spot to the right of the decimal point, so we knew that we would just write 0.33. Now we can't just write 5.12 for this one, because that 12, the 2 in the 12 has to end up in the 10,000ths spot. Let's just go ahead and write down some blanks on the board here to help us remember our place values. So we'd have 5 in one spot and then a decimal point, our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So that 12, the 2 needs to go here and the 1 here, and then zeros go there and a 5 goes there. 5.0012 is the way we would write that answer. 5 and 12 10,000ths. Now let's go the other way. Let's use a numerical problem in digit form basically, and let's write that using words. So we have 361 thousandths, because that 1 is in the thousandth spot. We just count over from the decimal point, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that's when we'll write it in words, we have to say 61 thousandths. And so we'll just write 300 61 and that tells us where our decimal point is, 360 hyphen 1 thousandths. And so that's how we would write the answer in words. Look at D. Let's write this one using words as well. Now, a good thing to do is just to count out your decimal places so that you write the correct place value for the decimal side. And so let's just think about this. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths. So we'll be saying 8 and 513 millionths. And let's just go ahead and write that. 8 and for our decimal point 513 millionths. Remember, we always end these with a THS. And that also helps us know that we're talking about the decimal side of that number. 8 and 513 millionths. Everything to the left of the word and, that's to the left of the decimal point. Everything to the right of the word and, that's to the right of the decimal point. Let's go on to adding and subtracting of decimal numbers, and this is real similar to adding and subtracting of money value problems, except when you're working with money, you usually just have 2 decimal places, and you always line those decimal points up whether you're adding or subtracting. Same idea with decimal numbers. They may not both have 2 decimal points, but you do the same thing. You write them vertically, line up the decimal points. So let's do practice problem E, and the order that you add them in doesn't matter either. I'll just put the 31.3 on top and then line up the decimal point to 0.865. Now that top number does not have as many decimal places as the bottom one. So all we do is we just put some zeros in just to help us think about what to add. There's nothing there. 0 represents nothing. So we put some zeros, and now we just go ahead and add column by column. 0 and 5 is 5. 0 and 6 is 6. 8 and 3 is 11. So we carry that over. And really we're saying 11 tenths, or 1 and 1/10. So that 1 that we just wrote, that represents 1/10. And then we move that other 1 from the 1 and 1/10 to the left side of the decimal point, to the ones position. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4. And then we have a 3. So there's our answer, 34.165. Let's do a subtraction problem. In subtraction, the order does matter when we do subtraction. And let's just line these up. The first number, the bigger one, we put on top, 62.015. The smaller one on bottom, minus 13.773. So the order does matter when we're doing subtraction. It doesn't matter in addition. And now let's go ahead and subtract. 5 minus 3 is 2. 1 minus 7, we can't do that. We can't borrow from the 0 either, so we need to borrow from the 2. And then we'll say 10 there. Make that a 9 and bring the 1 over there. 11 minus 7 is 4. 9 minus 7 is 2. 1 minus 3, we can't do that, so we need to borrow from the 6. Make that a 5. And we'll have 11 minus 3 is 8. 5 minus 1 is 4. 48.242. So addition and subtraction of decimal numbers, that works just like adding and subtracting money values, except when you don't have the same number of decimal places in one number as the other one, you can just add zeros on to make it look like they have the same number of decimal places. Let's go to part C in this lesson on rounding decimal numbers. You round them the same way you do whole numbers. We learned about rounding whole numbers back in lesson 2, and you just follow the directions. It says round here to the nearest thousandth, and so you find the thousandth place and you circle it, and that would be hundreds or tenths, hundredths, thousandths would be the 3. So you circle the 3 and you put an arrow over the next digit after it. If that digit is 5 or greater, then you round the 3 up. If it's less than 5, then you leave the 3 alone. And it's less than 5, it's a 2. So we would write this out, 38.153. And that's the answer. Look at practice problem H. Round that number to 4 decimal places. So when it asks you to round to a certain number of decimal places, you just go to the right of the decimal point and you circle that number however many places over. So 4 decimal places, that means we would go 1654. The 4 is 4 decimal places to the right of the decimal point. If it said round to 2 decimal places, then we would have circled that first 6 there, the second place to the right of the decimal point. So we circle that 4, we put an arrow over the next digit, and that helps us remember that's the one that tells us whether to round up or leave it alone. If it's greater than 5 or equal to 5, then we round up, and it is an 8, so that means we're going to round that 4 up to a 5, and we'll write 457.1655. And that would be that problem rounded to 4 decimal places. So when you're rounding decimal numbers, they'll tell you based on the name of that place value, like thousandths or hundredths, or they'll tell you a certain place, a certain numerical place, the first, the second, the third, the fourth decimal place to round to. Okay, well that's all for lesson 6.